There's one more group of workflow settings I need to bother you about before we move on, and those are the settings for your task list and your history list. The task list actually refers to items being written to the task list on the site, and that task list can be connected by your users back to Outlook. So an example is that if you use an issues list and you fill out an issue and assign it to someone, that item is automatically placed on the task list. And then if that user connects the task list to Outlook, they'll see their tasks in their own Outlook profile. It's a really easy thing for the users to do. For example, here's our task list, and it's really as easy as choosing List, Connect to Outlook, to connect back to your Outlook account. And then any items that I have on this task list automatically appear here on my list in Outlook. Isn't that just a great thing for users? So because this is so easy, it makes sense for us to try to put things in the task list as a way to encourage users to go ahead and complete them, because when they mark them done in Outlook, it marks them done here in SharePoint and will reflect that back to your workflow. Because of that, I really want to use one consolidated task list. I might have 3 or 4 different workflows on a site, but I try to stick with one task list. If I decided I wanted a different task list, I could create it here. If I do, I'll need to direct my users to connect that task list to Outlook as well. And that's just one extra thing that they may not remember, or they may choose not to do. So I'd like to make this really easy for them. But one of the things that's important here is I also need to do this early on, because if I do it after I've published the workflow, and if I do it, way down the road, then I may actually make my workflow stop working. There are directions on the Microsoft site about how you can double-check list references or go back and change them, but you really don't want to have to do that. So the preference would be that you not change the task list or the history list unless you need to. If you have many workflows in a particular site, and you know that you're going to have a lot of workflows, you might want to begin by creating a separate history list for workflows that are going to generate a lot of history. SharePoint is going to write to these workflows. It's going to write when a workflow is canceled. It's going to write when a workflow is completed, and you will choose to write to this history list too, because this is the place that you can collect information that you can go back and look at to try to diagnose any issues you might be having with a workflow. So if you want a separate history list, there's nothing else that links to it. It doesn't hook to Outlook like the task list does, but you would want to do this immediately at the start of creating your workflow. And so if you said that I would like to create a new history list, then SharePoint will automatically create a list called Send Email to Library Monitor History. It will use exactly the name of your workflow and append the word history on the end. The last item here in Settings, Show Workflow Visualization on Status Page. As you can tell when I point to it, requires a whole lot of things. SharePoint Server Enterprise Edition, but it also requires Visio Premium on the computer that SharePoint Server is running on. And then it will give you a small visualization if you want to see that. So, settings for your task list and your history list up front, as well as your setting for start options just to make sure that your workflow is actually running. These settings you can change at any time with no problem. These settings, if you change them, will create some difficulty for you. So make sure you have your task list and history list settings clear in your head and set up the way you'd like to set them before you start running your workflow.